Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Bowman, Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Brain. Welcome to this presentation on modernizing the mile. U.S. Foods builds a smarter future for daily planning, presented by Descartes. Quick reminder, there will be an audience question and answer session at the end of this presentation. Audience members are encouraged to submit their questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. So U.S. Foods operates one of the largest private fleets in the country, delivering to more than 250,000 customers, from independent restaurants to hospitals and hotels. Now, the company is leading a major initiative to modernize daily route planning across a decentralized network of more than 70 distribution centers. In this session, we're going to hear how U.S. Foods is streamlining operations, reducing complexity, and building a smarter, more agile routing model. We'll talk about how they're replacing outdated systems, capturing critical tribal knowledge, and using technology to improve service reliability, drive efficiency, and support long-term sustainability, all without losing sight of local needs or customer experience. With that, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. Ryan Pelfrey is VP Enterprise Routing with U.S. Foods. He joined the company in June of 2022 as Senior Director of Last Mile Capability and Development. Today, Ryan supports daily routing and enterprise routing optimization efforts across more than 6,000 daily routes and 70 distribution and operating centers across the U.S. Cindy Brandt is VP of Fleet Solutions at Descartes, where she drives go-to-market strategy in routing, mobility, and telematics, ensuring alignment with industry demands. Cindy has 23 years of experience in transportation technology, specializing in optimizing last and final mile operations, dispatch and tracking, telematics and ELDs, video-based safety, and data analytics. And Ryan Callahan is a senior account executive at Descartes with deep experience in food service distribution. With a strong background in final mile and fleet operations, Ryan brings practical insights into how distributors can simplify complexity, improve route efficiency, and strengthen customer satisfaction at the point of delivery. Welcome, everybody. With that, I'd like to toss the presentation over to Sydney Brandt. Sydney, take it away.
Thank you very much, Bob, for that introduction for all of us. I want to take a minute to talk a little bit about it, Descartes. We are all about moving the world, literally. As a global leader in logistics technology, we help over 26,000 customers around the globe get things from point A to point B in a smarter, faster, and more efficient way. From raw materials heading to a factory or finished products landing at your door, our tech is behind the scenes, making it all happen. At the very heart of it, though, we are a team of 2,200 logistics pros who love solving tough problems while working side by side with our customers to help them succeed in what they do every day. We're very proud of 20 straight years of record performance and the fact that we reinvest over 15% of our revenue back into R&D every year. Why? Because we want to keep the innovation flowing to our customers. Specifically in our pillar, Fleet Solutions, the delivery management platform empowers distributors to optimize routes, streamline dispatch, and execute daily operations with both precision and confidence. We do that all while fostering real-time driver and customer engagement, capturing valuable feedback throughout the day to fuel continuous improvement. This improvement is powered by AI and delivers transparent and reliable experiences to everybody involved with our software. We like to say every route, every driver, every delivery, optimized, connected, and built to exceed expectations. Now, I'd love to hand it over to Ryan Pelfrey from U.S. Foods to talk about their fleet transformation.
Bob, Cindy, thanks so much. It is an absolute pleasure to be here this morning with all of you. Again, my name is Ryan Pelfrey, and my job at U.S. Foods is to deliver on our key results of safety, service, and cost. And how I do that is by supporting our enterprise routing optimization team and our field routing operations. As Bob mentioned earlier, been with US Foods for about 3 years, currently in the Vice President of Enterprise Routing, and we support over 70 distribution centers executing 6,500 daily routes a day to support and service over 250,000 customers across multiple segments. In the last 3 years, we've been on this really incredible journey with our Descartes partners, right, to optimize and to bring forward the latest in technology in our daily routing, in our network design and planning tools, and in our proof of delivery systems. And today we'll spend some time talking about those systems and how they're supporting through our integrations and deployments. A little bit about US Foods. As Bob mentioned, we are the fourth largest private fleet in the United States with over 6,500 trucks and routes on the road every day. 250,000 customers and roughly 30,000 associates to make that happen. As we say at US Foods, we like to help our customers make it. And the only way for us to do that, right, is to bring all 30,000 of us together to service and support our customers so that they can support their customers, grow their business, and make it. Let's talk a little bit about our routing and delivery improvement plan. As we've been in this journey and started to engage and come to life with Descartes Route Planner, we wanted to really focus and make sure that we had clear understanding of what our problem statement is and what problems we're trying to solve. You're going to hear me reference that multiple times in the 20 plus minutes we have today together, because I think it's really important as you talk about transformative initiatives such as changing over and bringing to life a new routing platform to meet your goals. It's really important that you are clear and intentional about what problem you're trying to solve. For US Foods, it was really clear for us. We needed to replace an unsupported routing system with a modern solution that will allow us to achieve reliability and productivity goals. And through this time today, we'll talk about what those are. But to really give kind of a high level view, we wanted to not only, right, replace our current unsupported system, but there were two main objectives or pillars we wanted to achieve, right? Reduction and improvement. As we think about reduction or reducing, there were kind of three key areas that we really wanted to focus in on. Number one, right, reducing waste. As we think about the last mile, miles, right, are an area of waste. If we can get more cases delivered and drive less miles, that is the equation for winning when it comes to profitability, productivity, safety, and service. Similarly, I mentioned that we're the fourth largest private fleet in the United States, which means we have a pretty sizable carbon footprint. As we think about how to be good stewards of the environment and how to be good partners within our environment, the number one way to reduce our footprint is reduce miles. Well, how do you do that when you're growing, right? As your business is growing, as more customers are coming on board, right? That all leans to more miles. Miles equal fuel consumption, repair and maintenance, right? And wear on the life of the existing fleet. And so mileage reduction becomes a really, really big part of solving the problem as we think about how to not only do we grow, but how do we become more productive using the tools within the routing space. And then Bob mentioned a little bit earlier, reliance on tribal knowledge. US Foods has been in business for over 150 years, and that growth has come both organically and through mergers and acquisitions. As you think about, right, combining the powers of 2 and 3 different companies to become the fourth largest fleet, a lot of that comes with reliance on tribal knowledge. And so as we think about how to use data and technology to move us forward, one of the problems we wanted to solve is to really make sure that we can take all of that information, all of what's known within the markets of the 200 routers, and bring those into systems that really inform how to go about executing daily routing in an efficient way that, again, drives safety, service, and cost. And so you'll hear us talk a little bit about how we've transitioned to a single source of truth to really guide our routing activities. Along with that, we want to improve, right, visibility and optimization, right? It's so important for customers to be able to see how are their service providers, how are their distributors performing, how does that set them up to help them make it? When is my delivery arriving? How do I staff appropriately? And so visibility and optimization within that becomes incredibly important. We talked about efficiency, right? How do we increase those cases, but hold the miles or reduce the miles? Ultimately, we measure ourselves in case per mile, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the presentation. Order execution, right? That clean end-to-end experience. If I'm a customer and I'm relying on my distributor, right? What does it look like to be able to get good visibility into the products available? How do I order them? How do I see the entire life cycle from end to end all the way into the moment that it shows up at my door? How do I account for it? And how do I make sure that I'm getting on time and in full what I asked for in my distributor? And then we just need to continue to strengthen that last mile and broadline service, right? Service is so critical and so important to being able to grow your business, but also to be able to help your customers make it. And so as we think about the tools, as we think about modernizing our platform, those were all things that were really important for us, all while still solving for the main problem statement. So let's talk a little bit about some of the unique challenges that we discovered here, right, at US Foods as we are going through the deployment. To give some context, we are 70% through the deployment, which will represent a roughly an 18-month timeline. So as you can imagine, with 75 distribution centers, that's pretty aggressive. But as we worked through and tried to understand, it became really, really important for us to understand the unique challenges. As Bob mentioned, we're relatively decentralized. And what that means essentially is that each of the individual markets and areas roll up to an area president who has ultimate accountability for how they're going to go about servicing, supporting their customers, keeping their drivers safe, and driving productivity. Variability in our markets is pretty wide. So as we think about it, and it was kind of mentioned before, we have a mix of segments that we support. Independent restaurants, regional concepts, healthcare is a big one, right? Education and government. And each one of those customers has unique opportunities or challenges that we need to try to help them solve to make it. It also creates a unique set of cases by market, right? Area or even domicile. So as we think about how do we support places like Southeast Alaska? How do we support different customers like cruise ships, right? Coming out of Canaveral. All of these things create very different variables within the market. And it's incredibly important for us to look at how do we solve each one of those problems through the technology that we're deploying, right? To help us service and support our customers. Add in another layer of kind of unique challenges is the mix of labor planning. So as you think about union and non-union or represented markets or non-represented markets, each of them come with driver pay package differences. Some have route bids, right, that are part of the agreements, different qualifications. You think about access to Army bases or different types of access pieces. There's a lot of variables and a lot of things to consider. As we kind of tie back to our original problem statement, right? That problem statement is around modernizing our platform, coming off something that is unsupported. To be able to answer all of the different challenges, right, in these types of unique, we needed to modernize. We needed to partner with somebody like Descartes to help us solve these problems. And then lastly, to answer all of those, right, a big mix of equipment, right? When you're the fourth largest private fleet in the United States, it isn't all the same. It isn't all 53-foot dry vans, right? It isn't all the exact same configurations of equipment. There's such a unique model to make sure that we can service and answer the call to help support our questions, or help support our customers. And so what's important here, right, is partnering with somebody like Descartes to help understand the use cases, build the solutions, and bring those forward in a way that really, really support our customers. So let's talk a little bit about the key solutions and the partnership we've had with Descartes that are really helping us win in this space. There's three things that we utilize and partner with in Descartes to really help drive our business forward. So I'm going to talk about each one of them in a little bit of detail. We execute something that's called market-led routing. Market-led routing is a routine and a run-the-business program that US Foods brought in roughly in 2021 to kind of answer some of the changing dynamics post-COVID. What it did is it really drove us forward in how do we strategically reroute our regions, areas, and markets to make sure that we are constantly staying in front of delivering value and safety, service, and cost. As we think about how to use those, we use the WinRoute tool that Descartes provides as a strategic rerouting tool and element that allows us to look at small, medium, and large size projects and execute those projects cleanly. So said differently, if a market comes to my optimization team and says, we really need to solve for improved service, or we need to identify how we can free up 4 or 5 assets, or we need to onboard or offboard a customer based on changing business needs, They will bring forward to our routing optimization team a success criteria, and we will enter that into the engine and tool to allow it to produce outcomes that we can consider across all our cross-functional partners. This allows us to make sure that we are understanding what are our opportunities, how do we solve the problem, and how do we use this technology to inform sales, operation, drivers on what good looks like to create value, again, in safety, service, and cost. The big deployment we're talking about right now is really in our daily routing space. So Route Planner is a dynamic daily routing tool that Descartes partners and is designed for us to really help find optimization in our daily routing. A couple of things that are really important for us. This has enabled us to create a single source of truth for our customers and their delivery attributes. Prior to coming onto Route Planner, we really struggled with having some bits of customer information in one system and other parts of it in another system, and not being able to align to make sure that those were telling the same story, which had a real impact on the service our customers were experiencing. We've solved that problem by using our Salesforce data to be able to inform Route Planner to say, this is what good looks like, or these are the parameters our customers are expecting to be able to deliver cleanly, service them at a high level, and to give them repeatable and sustainable service that allows them to make it, planning their staff, planning their receiving, and making sure that we deliver on time and in full. The last piece to that is around the proof of delivery, perform for food as it's called, which really allows us to make sure that we have the right products on the truck, that we can scan and account for those right products. We do what we call scan, stack, and roll. It allows us to make sure that we cleanly enter into the location, get all of the right products in the right space, freezer, cooler, or in their dry locations. And then it gives the customer a high level of confidence that we have brought them the items that they've ordered. It's one thing to just be on time. It's another thing to make sure that you're on time with all of the items, all of the correct items that the customer has ordered. And so the POD system has really, really helped us win in that space and ties in our end-to-end experience for the customer very, very cleanly. So let me share a little bit about some of the success stories and how we've gone about deploying Route Planner and really how the market engagement has led to this success. So there's kind of three chevrons I really want to focus in on here. We talked a little bit about the individual market approach, so I'll talk to that for just a second. Key pieces on collaboration, right? I mentioned that we're decentralized in the sense that we're supporting each individual market, and it's really important to make sure that our partners understand what their roles are in successful deployment. And then the feedback channel. That might be the most important element on any large scale system deployment. We should not fear feedback. We should look at it as a gift, and we'll talk a little bit about how we're using that to help drive successful outcomes. So as we talk about individual market approach, one of the things that we needed to do and do very cleanly, and we talked about our data being in a bunch of different spaces, was execute a service window initiative that really was a capture of the current experience that allowed us to bring all of that information and all that data into a single source of truth to give us a clean go-in position for deployment. The goal of this was to make sure that the change in software did not lead to any type of negative experience for our customer, almost so much that they didn't notice that it occurred. And if anything, they did notice that it occurred, it's because they saw an improvement in that space. Secondly, I mentioned each of our markets has such unique business models based on how they need to go about servicing their customers. And so a really robust intake process was established to make sure that we executed a multi-question approach to really understand the business needs. One of the things that I'll share that's really, really beautiful around Route Planner and so many of the Descartes tools is they're customizable in a way that if we bring forward use cases to our partners, along with our own internal IT plus the Descartes development team, we can typically build some type of a solution that will support any unique business case. This really allows us to make sure that we're answering and solving the problems that the markets are asking us to solve, and doing so in a way that they see the results from that solved. Number two, the collaboration component. One of the pieces of success around that is really building a strong, clean understanding and a multi-week playbook. For us to deploy each market, it takes between about 8 and 12 weeks from initial intake, initial kickoff, all the way through go live and hypercare. The only way that we can execute that is to really stay detailed and discipline to our playbook. And a playbook, again, ties back to what is the original problem statement. It's a collaboration between our IT partners, the deployment team, and the market leadership. So they have a really clear understanding what week 1 looks like, what week 2 looks like, what are our critical milestones, and how do we make sure that we are on track and execute those clearly. The second piece of that, and for anybody that doesn't know what RACI is really just an acronym around responsible, accountable, consultative, and informative. What's key in all of that is making sure that those roles and responsibilities are really clear and really clean for each of the individuals that are part of this deployment. At US Foods, it isn't just around the deployment team or our IT partners. The markets have high level responsibility and accountability to delivering the solution. So as I think about an area president, or I think about how that looks, right, at the highest level of leadership, they are assigned specific tasks and specific milestones that they absolutely must execute. This leads to this collaboration and success and really sets us up for deployment success. From a feedback standpoint, and I mentioned that this is maybe one of the most important, right? Feedback is very much a gift. And so as we talk about how do we go about gaining insights and knowledge, a lot of this happens in real time. A couple of the ways that we saw this come to life: multi-week driver engagement programs and feedback systems. The drivers are the ones out there executing. They're the ones making it happen. They're the face to the customer. And so providing and making sure that we have a really, really clean and detailed way to get their feedback so that it can come back to the teams is critical and paramount. Prior to going into any of our go live activities, we set up mock routing sessions. This gives our routers and transportation teams in the field hands-on learning and opportunity to touch, feel, and use the systems. It creates a scenario or situation where many of their questions get answered before that critical go live date. As my deployment director will say, if it's not real until it's real, but this gives us a real good opportunity for our routers to get into the systems, get into the platforms, start to play around and understand where there's opportunities, what looks different, what's different from their previous engagement, and gives us an opportunity, right, to do that across all of our functions. We do final systems goes. We make sure that we have a good, strong go, no go, that everybody's aligned. And then as soon as we go live, as soon as we do the hard cut over to the new system, right, we have a daily review and response forum that allows all of our cross-functional partners to be able to give and gain feedback on how did the routes look the night before? What are the feedback from our customers? What are the feedbacks from our sellers? What are the feedback from our drivers? So that we can capture them, catalog them, and then identify what problem it is that we need to try to help solve. And then from post-deployment, we think about hypercare, right? We're on site for 2 weeks, and as we depart the market, we offer them a 30, 60, 90-day milestones on what does good look like? How do they continue to lean in if they need to see improvements in service? How do they need to continue to lean in if they need to see improvements in productivity? How do they solve the problems through their reference guides to be able to make sure that they are self-sustained as we move to the next deployment or move on to the next deployments? We also do check-ins with the area leadership, right? 45 days in, what are the things the area president's thinking? What are the things the VPO are thinking, vice president of operations are thinking around how has this gone so far? What additional problems do they need support with? And how do we continue to drive them towards being able to self-sustain as we go through these deployments? What's also important to make sure, right, is not only your original problem statement, but understanding what are the key results you're trying to achieve. So as we talk about, right, not only moving to a more modern platform, there were a couple very specific goals that we identified for the enterprise as we talk about delivering on our results of safety, service, and cost. At US Foods, we want to continue to improve every year on a year over year by increasing and improving our case per mile. So I mentioned before, right? US Foods continues to grow. We continue to add customers to our portfolio. We continue to increase case growth, but we want to do so by holding flat or decreasing our miles at the same time. And so that is the equation for case per mile growth through this implementation. Service is also an incredibly important thing for our customers as we think about how to help them make it. So continuing to make sure that our team can plan over 90% for on time really continues to give us a competitive advantage as we show up for our customers. Similarly, we heard from our customers, continue to improve in that real-time order visibility, right? How do we make sure that they can see their orders and the life cycle of their orders from point of sale all the way until delivery? And then similarly, creating that same level of visibility on what orders are coming into the nightly routing session ahead of that session. One of the things that we were able to solve from our prior platform to the new one is giving routers real-time visibility so they could make more proactive decisions and less reactive decisions, which have led to improvements in productivity and service and creates a safer opportunity for our drivers on daily execution of their routes. And then we mentioned it before, like reducing those outbound miles. How do we continue to drive waste out of the system? And how do we continue to be good stewards when it comes to our overall footprint and CO2 emissions? So with the last couple of minutes, we'll talk about some lessons learned. And I think this is incredibly important for anybody that's considering, right, or looking at doing this type of a transformative deployment. Taking that feedback and really continuing to gain on the lessons learned. So a couple of things that I'll offer for this group. Number one, keep it simple. Right? As we talk about, and I tie back to what is the original problem you're trying to solve, make sure your scope and scale of the project stays within that initial problem statement. These technologies are fantastic, and there's so many capabilities. There's so many ways to go service your customer, and it gets really exciting to think about, well, what are these additional features? What are these additional functions that I can do? But if you're going to do this type of a transformative deployment, to get through your deployment, you got to keep it simple. So clearly document your business requirements and your problems. Plan your work and follow that plan. Stick to it. If you have a market that comes up with an idea, or you come up with a new feature or idea that really is helpful, get that on your intake, put it on your roadmap, but make sure that you stay the course as far as what your original scope and scale is. Number two, rigorous testing with your IT and business partners. At the core of this is a technology change. And as you modernize your technology stack, you're going to have to play nice through integrations and APIs with multiple different systems. The only way to make sure that that doesn't impact your markets or operation negatively is through rigorous testing. So commit to QA testing, quality assurance testing, user acceptance, and full end-to-end. Then share those release notes with the business. Let them know what features and functions you're releasing and what value it is to them. Get them excited about it. It will drive greater adoption. And last piece that I'll offer to this team, spend time learning and understanding your markets. Again, I identified like we're more decentralized than maybe your organization might be, but it's really important to understand what are the problems that each one of your distribution centers, each one of your networks, each one of your cross docks or domiciles, right, are trying to solve. Understand their goals. What are their requirements and how to measure success? Then clearly and cleanly assign roles and responsibilities, right? It isn't just on your deployment team to do that. Each market needs to be an engaged partner and have ownership to make sure that they deliver the results. And then give that visibility, weekly status updates, key accomplishments. What are our next actions and key results? What's the overall timeline and what does success look like? Thank you for your time today.
Ryan, thank you so much for that introduction to U.S. Foods, telling us about the incredibly complex challenge you faced and how you addressed it with the help of Descartes Route Planner. I now, if you will indulge me, have the opportunity to ask you a few questions before we bring in the rest of the panel. Let me just start by asking you what strategies proved most effective in driving adoption and engagement among your drivers as you moved from a legacy routing platform to this advanced routing planning system from Descartes.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. I think one of the things that's the most important is we think about the from and to. We're coming from a static tool to a more dynamic tool. And so by design, routes are going to look different for the drivers, right? So drivers are creatures of habit. They love consistency, right? They love those standards. And so, as I mentioned a little bit earlier in the presentation, we had a really, really robust driver engagement package that came with each of the deployments. Now, Bob, one of the things that's really important in that space, right? And I've mentioned this a few times, it's not about the deployment team doing that work. It's about arming and empowering our transportation leaders in the markets that already have the relationships with the drivers, arming them with the tools, the talking points, the feedback channels to make sure that the drivers feel engaged from start to finish. Drivers will give you their feedback. And we need to look at that as a really, really valuable component of the deployment. And so the strategy was really about building these robust communication tools, to arming the transportation leaders to say, this is what it looks like. We're coming from and going to. Here's what might be different. Now, drivers would love your feedback. What questions, what concerns, what things can we answer? What are the important things on your route that we absolutely need to account for? And that has really transitioned into feedback back to our design and our deployment team to make sure that we are building solutions that help drivers in safety and helping them serve their customers and ultimately helping them be more productive.
Sure. Of course, the system is going to be of huge benefit to the drivers themselves in making them more efficient, in making their miles more efficient, and cutting down on time, wasted time. So I could see that if you could position it in that way, you're going to get a lot of driver buy-in. Okay, so you told us, Orion, about your 75 distribution centers, and you mentioned that each one has quite unique market characteristics. Obviously, this has got to pose a huge amount of operational complexities. What do you feel, or what were the most significant implementation challenges you faced? And how were these various regional variances addressed within the larger deployment strategy?
Yeah, really great question. So as you think about your go in position and going to deploy, it's almost impossible to know every unique opportunity or business case across all the markets. One of the things that we did was really make sure that as we went through deployment, we did some initial beta testing, but really got to MVP, right? MVP, minimum viable product. What does it take to place an order? How does it take to take that order and put it through the routing system? Can we see it? Can we route it? Can we then send it downstream to pick? Can the warehouse select? Can they load it, right? And that became the most kind of foundational and fundamental steps. As we continued to work down the progress, right, through our IT and product delivery partners, we would essentially design and develop what we knew. But as we went to each individual market through the intake process, through trying to understand, right, each of their business use case, we would capture new requirements, new user stories, and make sure that that was cleanly entered into our IT and product delivery pipeline. Then, based off understanding what those challenges were, how they fit within the timeline, our business and IT partners would essentially assign a number of points that are related to the development time to allow us to prioritize, to make sure that we were answering each of the unique situations, but prioritizing them in the right order as we learned about, as we intake, and as we applied. If something applied to multiple markets, it would get prioritized high because we could deliver that to more markets at one time. If it was an individual or unique use case, we'd put the right resources to that and prioritize it accordingly. What that's allowed us to do is not only answer the call for the different and unique problems within each market that they need help solving, but has allowed us to stay on track from our timeline. So instead of getting frustrated or instead of feeling like, shoot, we can't move forward because we continue to run into these new unique use cases, we hit them head on. We work with our IT and delivery partners to make sure that we're answering all of these unique business cases. And in some instances, Bob, we have to tell the market, hey, we're not going to be able to solve for that right now, but it's on our roadmap and we'll inform you or update you when we can through those release notes, through those different things I mentioned earlier, to make sure they know I've been heard, it's cataloged, it's prioritized, and when it's delivered, it'll be communicated.
Everything of this, every system of this complexity has to be implemented in phases. You just simply can't dump the whole thing on everybody at once, and you're going to have chaos if you do, if you try. Okay, you gave us some great lessons learned, Ryan. I want you to reflect back on your own implementation journey, though, and to tell me, were there any critical insights or lessons that you wish you'd had been identified earlier that would have facilitated a more seamless rollout?
Yeah, as I think about that and sort of maybe some earlier lessons learned, a lot of what we described on what we've seen success came through learning as we went. I think there was some opportunity as we think about what the scope and scale was to continue to help the organization understand from the early get-go, this is the original problem we're trying to solve. So as I mentioned, scope creep is big, right? There's opportunities, there's new features. As business changes, we did run into a couple of different opportunities where a sales partner might bring up an opportunity to really solve something for a new customer we're onboarding. And sometimes we would get distracted by saying, hey, I think we can solve for that. Where there's an opportunity to learn that is right, just to make sure that we're not only socializing with our own team, within the supply chain operations and delivery team, but also making sure we're really clean and clear about what problem we're solving, what scope looks like for our cross-functional partners in sales, in commercial, in merchandising, in replenishment, in all those different areas. We probably, I would say we missed on the opportunity to make sure that they were all really clear in understanding what we were trying to do with this, to make sure that we could stay the course early on. Ultimately, we were able to correct, but it did come with a few bumps in the road. And I think we could have gotten ahead of that to make sure that we stayed the course, make sure that other partners didn't get frustrated, but could still deliver a really, really strong solution.
Thank you for that. Now, at this point, let's bring Sydney Brand and Ryan Callahan in on this, and we can have a panel discussion with everybody on camera. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Once again, welcome to all of you. Really appreciate that. I'm going to start out. I'm sorry, Ryan Pelfrey. I just can't leave you alone. I want to ask the first question of you again. We've talked about U.S. Foods as one of the largest private fleets in the country, got thousands of daily routes, highly decentralized network. Give me some key considerations. Talk more about key considerations or best practices that you've developed to support daily routing across this large and varied operation.
So one of the things that we have done is built routines that allow for our network optimization team, right? So we call them routing optimization managers. They're the run the business support. Built really strong, robust routines that leverage and use all of the tools that I talked about earlier, from WinRoute to Route Planner to POD. And what it does is that routine is a weekly routine within our routing and transportation field spaces in which they can bring forward opportunities that they see in their daily routing. So whether that's I need to solve for this customer, whether I need to solve for a capacity problem, whether I need to solve for optimization of productivity, whether I need to set up a new domicile, whatever those might be. And this routine is entrenched in our markets for them to bring forward to our optimization team, to allow our optimization team to use these tools to go help solve these problems, while our field routers can focus on the daily routing, right? Because at the end of the day, they've got a business to run and we've got to deliver products to customers. And so that routine has become a really, really robust routine that allows us to work optimization and daily routing at the same time so we can continue to drive safety service cost.
The fact that you can achieve that level of flexibility and agility in a system this huge, that's just massive. That's really impressive. So Cindy, last mile delivery continues to evolve very quickly, especially in those industries that have high service expectations, tight windows like U.S. Foods. Where are you seeing the biggest shifts in route planning approaches, and what is driving those changes?
I think that Ryan actually talked a couple about some of these changes that we're seeing. The biggest shift we're seeing today in route planning is really the move from static, kind of one size fits all routing to much more dynamic routing that's really supported with data-driven strategies. Customers are leveraging, advanced analytics, right? They're really diving in using AI to build smarter and more flexible routes, and even making sure that they can adjust in real time to business changes. Business has become far more dynamic in the last, 180 days than we've seen in a long time. Second is that concept of relying on tribal knowledge, right? Let's try to eliminate as much tribal knowledge as we can and centralize it. It's really important to gather it, but it makes everything outdated and much faster. If you can't centralize the knowledge, you can't move past the next information. But companies are now really starting to capture data all the way down to intricacies at the stop level, right? And sometimes even order types or delivery types. It's not just actual service times, but it's information about that customer location that you're visiting. But they're taking all this information and rolling it into the optimization of the planning tools. This improves accuracy, but also really can help significantly reduce costs. The last thing we see is just there's a lot of change in the economic environment right now. So all of our customers are seeing a lot of their customer locations opening, closing, or consolidating. Dynamic routing really lets these distributors prioritize high value accounts while still meeting delivery expectations for others as they enter and exit the market. It's all about, like Ryan said, creating this incredibly responsive network that balances both efficiency and service quality.
Ryan Callahan, obviously we've seen from this hour how routing can become a total daily scramble. From your perspective, how are companies using technology to bring more consistency and control to the day-to-day operations?
Yeah, sure, Bob. So I think, look, I mean, they're leveraging more. I think they're leveraging more optimization, automation, and Ryan alluded to it before. Both from a strategic planning perspective as well as a daily planning perspective, and sort of moving away from tribal knowledge inside the router's head. Router A may route something one way, router B could route the exact same set of routes a different way. But I think in order to kind of move to more of that, that data-driven optimization, like that does not happen overnight, and it takes a pretty good amount of coordination internally to make sure the data is clean and it stays clean. An example, and again, Ryan P alluded to this during his presentation, was time windows, right? Customer time windows. CRM may say it's one thing, the sales guy says it's something different, dispatcher thinks it's something different, and then yet the driver has a fourth different time window. He says, no, you know what, I can get in there early. I think that's one of the biggest things we hear, and I know Ryan P and the U.S. Foods team, they went through a very thoughtful and systematic exercise to make sure that those time windows moving forward were accurate, and they were agreed upon right across the board. So I think again, that data driven process, it's easier said than done, but that's something that I think we've seen. In order to be able to leverage more automation, you got to make sure the data is clean and accurate.
Let me follow up with that, Ron Callahan, because we just heard Cindy say the letters AI, and it's the first mention we've had of that in this hour. AI, I mean, this seems to me like route planning is completely in AI's wheelhouse. The complexity of it, to the extent that no human being could possibly conceive of all the different combinations of routes that are optimal for an operation of this scale. Where does AI come into the picture, Ryan?
Yeah, no, a great follow-up question about it. I think a couple different scenarios as it relates to, at least daily planning. I think one, and again, Cindy alluded to it, but service time. How long is this delivery going to take? Right? We think we know, right? But if I deliver to Bob's restaurant versus Ryan's restaurant, there may be different service times based off of, I got to pull around the alleyway, how much order volume am I delivering? So within routing and really more execution, the ability to capture how long, the driver's spending at each stop. We offer the ability to do machine learned service times, both from a fixed and variable component. So there's that piece. I think two, there's also, again, helping AI from a time window capture perspective. Hey, we think the time window is this, but if we look back historically, we actually see the drivers arriving at a different time. So potentially leveraging AI to suggest, a more accurate time window. And then I think the third piece that we're seeing and we're working on is really also additional, I'll call it drive time or service time by driver, right? You're going to have certain drivers that are definitely more efficient than others. They may drive faster, maybe take a more effective route. They may service the customer faster. So I think kind of using AI to take those actuals, learn from them, and then suggest, hey, here's the actual calculation. This is how long we think this stop or this route should take, and feeding that back into the routing system to ultimately then get you a more accurate, set of data that now is going to give you a more accurate plan.
Interesting how AI can become the automated version of tribal knowledge in a way that is actually of value to you in today's environment.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah. So Cindy, we're hearing a lot today about optimization and visibility. What impacts are you seeing that these improvements are having actually on customer satisfaction and service reliability, like bottom line impacts?
So predictability and reliability are absolutely critical. Customers want to know that if you promise a delivery, you're going to keep that promise. That's where optimization tools incredibly shine throughout the process. They're going to help the distributors hit these incredibly tight time windows and reduce transportation costs by creating smarter routes, while balancing the many changes that all these distributors are facing with so many of the customers entering and exiting the marketplace, which of course makes manual routing almost impossible to do. But beyond being on time, customers now really expect real-time communication. With the right visibility tools, we can proactively alert them, hey, your delivery is 10 minutes out. They can allocate staff and be ready to accept that order, and improves overall service reliability. One of the things
Cindy, I think you're breaking up a little.
Though, is when we get to drive to the bottom line, that there's a fielding all these phone calls. It's incredibly human capital it takes an incredible amount of human capital, and it's very expensive. We've estimated these "Where's my truck" phone calls, or Wizmo phone calls, can cost anywhere from $25 to $35 per call, because you're taking so many of them, not only from external constituents, but internal constituents as well.
That, add up
The
huge
last thing
amount.
I would say, just really about customer satisfaction and service reliability, is that implementing digital customer engagement tools is not a nice to have anymore. It's becoming critically important, because in a crazy economy, differentiation from competition is everything right now. There are multiple distributors for every product you're buying. You can't just think about it. You have to find ways to differentiate yourself. And this digital engagement with customers is clearly a way to differentiate yourself.
Well, thank you very much for that. Thanks to all of you panelists for your great presentation and your answers to my questions, especially. But now at this point, let's bring the audience in for audience Q&As. We already have some questions that have come in, but even as we are answering the ones that have come in, we do invite the audience to continue to submit your questions by clicking on that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. We'll get to as many of your questions as we can, time permitting. So I'm just going to throw these out and see who wants to grab them. Maybe this might be a Ryan P. one, I don't know, but anybody else who wants to answer it. The question is, what were some of the KPIs, the key performance indicators, that you used for post-deployment milestones? Did the feedback loop, and we talked about that too, include customers?
Yeah, great question. I'll take that one. So I'll kind of go back to a couple of the key measures, right? Number one, system adoption. So we really were able to translate, based on the prior systems to the new systems, how many of the transactions were happening within the new platform, right? We really wanted to make sure that we could measure how comfortable and how much the routing teams use the new system to execute their daily routing. And so that was one really important thing. Number two, right, our ultimate key deliverable as far as productivity, our cases per mile. So we track that very cleanly. What did it look like prior to? What did it look like during deployment? And how did it look after? And then the last one that I think ties into sort of the secondary part of this was around the service component. So as we think about how we showed up today, right, we defined what planned on time looks like, but we very closely track how are the markets performing in their actual to plan. And then through the feedback channels, through our review and response, and with our sales leaders in the market, sought them to seek after with their customers real-time feedback about what their experience was. Has it improved? Has it changed? Does it look the same? How are we showing up in a way that looks different than, right? To try to understand, how did it translate? So we can measure it. We can say it's 90%, right? But we use some opportunities through their regular routines to get direct feedback from the customers to understand, does it translate in a way that's meaningful for the customer, that enables them to make it, right? That enables them to service their customers better.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess here's another one, just sort of who wants to talk. Maybe this is from either Sydney or Ryan Callahan. What have you done to improve service times per stop? Is there a function on Descartes that allows you to analyze the service time per stop for, say, a few weeks? For example, EDTs. I don't know, is that electronic data transfer, or I'm sure what that is, but what do you guys feel about that? Maybe Cindy could address that?
Sure. We've used machine learning with service times for many, many years. The reality, though, is that new technology is available so that we can start to make even more improvements. So for us, there's really two components. One is we've introduced some execution tools that allow you to really track, to a great degree of accuracy, arrival and departure times. We're going to take that information and feed it back into our machine learning tools to start to now, in the past, we've done this, is using historical information over time in order to re-architect new service times, right? But the reality is, as machine learning has become more sophisticated, we have the ability now to look at even more variables so that your service times become more and more accurate. It's not just about fixed and variable service time anymore. We can take information in about different relational databases in order to create more accurate service times. So it's an exciting time when we look at how machine learning as part of AI can transform what service times do and how accurate they can be. We're testing this with several customers right now, and quite frankly, the results are pretty impressive.
Thank you. This question is, I guess, again to Ryan P., and it kind of follows up on what we were talking about driver experience, driver acceptance. How have drivers responded to tools like scanning and POD, of proof of delivery? Has it made their day-to-day work actually easier, or has it introduced new challenges even in the short term?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think the way that I would answer this is there's a little bit of both in that scenario. Number one, right, in our ability to accurately scan and deliver to the customer, POD has really helped in that space. So as we think about how does that translate, it isn't just about the device. It's also about making sure, right, that there's the application and labeling to each case that's representative of what that item is for the customer. We have a really, really high, and in markets where we're really successful, a really high scan rate, which leads to really high first time quality and on time and in full. And for the drivers, this gives them a level of confidence that the cases are what the cases are supposed to be. So they can quickly scan each. The POD gives them immediate feedback on if there's anything that's missed, anything that's short, anything that's not what it's supposed to be, right? Which allows them to really focus on servicing the customer. It does take time to adopt, right? As you think about it, it's another sort of technology or tool on their hip, or they got to make sure that they have it with them. They got to make sure that it's charging, that it's in the cab, those types of things, right? And so it does take a little bit of time to get acclimated to now having this new tool. And then customer engagement's a little bit different. So I think there are times in which the drivers, right, are doing the right thing by producing the POD for the customer, saying, hey, this is everything that you ordered. I've been able to validate and verify. But you get some varying responses from customers, and that might be the bigger challenge for the drivers. So many of them will work through, try to communicate as best as possible, but we do run into times in which that becomes a little bit of a pain or a pressure point. All in all, though, the confidence that it gives the driver to be able to say, I know what I need to scan, I know what I need to pick, I know what I need to send in, and I know what I'm delivering is the right thing, gives them a high level of confidence that they can go in and service the customer at a really, really high.
So what have we learned today? We've learned that the food distribution industry is facing growing pressure, tighter delivery windows, rising customer expectations, labor shortages, and the need for smarter, more sustainable operations. Distributors that embrace automation, real-time visibility, and more agile routing strategies are positioning themselves to lead, and we've learned about how they're doing that today in the case of U.S. Foods. Unfortunately, we are out of time. We're just about out of time. We have time for one final question, which I'm going to pose to each of you, starting with you, Ryan Pelfrey. Here it is. What is the single most important shift that food distributors need to make today to stay competitive? And if they don't act now, what is the real risk to their business in the next 5 years?
As we think about one major shift that needs to occur, we think about the tools that are necessary to leverage to meet customer demand. As we go from static environments to dynamic environments, it's all to answer the question that customers have about how can you service my business to help make sure that I'm successful in servicing my customers. So the shift needs to be around getting those dynamic tools, getting them in your portfolio, and leveraging them to best service your customer.
Ryan Callahan, what's your perspective?
Yeah, Bob, I think it's, adopting intelligent, data-driven route planning and execution tools. I think ultimately, those that, sort of fail to adopt earlier, I think they're going to struggle, right, to remain competitive, given rising costs. I think they're going to see declining customer satisfaction and driver burnout. And I think in contrast with those that are, investing now, one, it's going to allow them to operate leaner, but I think also they'll be in a much stronger position in terms of winning new business and then adapting quickly to whatever the future market shifts are.
Cindy, last word to you.
So for me, it's going to be investing in digital transformation across their supply chain, specifically around customer engagement platforms. Why? Customer expectations have changed. They're expecting an Amazon-like experience with transparency, speed, and service. Distributors that don't have more digital offerings for self-service or upgrading their systems are going to be left behind.
Well, I certainly learned a lot in this last hour, and it was great to have the case of US Foods, one of the largest private fleets in the country, how they attacked this whole issue of route planning. Very educational, great insights from all of you, Ryan Pelfrey, Cindy Brent, and Ryan Callahan. Thank you so much, all of you, and thank you, audience, for your participation and your great questions. Here for you is a video case study about US Foods driving delivery accuracy and efficiency. You can learn more about what they did and their success story by scanning that QR code on this screen. And don't worry about pulling out your phone right now if you don't have time in the final few seconds of this webinar, because that will be sent to all of you who attended today. Once again, thanks everybody for your participation, and everybody have a great day.